I love building storage for my shop, but building cabinets like this can be expensive. With the current cost of plywood and the ridiculous price of cabinet hardware, adding much needed tool storage to your shop can get out of hand fast. But what if you could dodge all that? Or at least a huge chunk of it? In this video, I'll show you how I built these beautiful and functional shop cabinets with tons of storage that are simple to build and customize to your shop space. And I'm going to tell you exactly how I did it for half the cost of building this. Building cabinets typically means using some type of sheet good, preferably plywood and preferably nice looking plywood. The problem is, nice looking plywood is expensive. Well, okay, the bad looking stuff is expensive. The sweet stuff is really expensive. At least that's what I thought. My go-to for building cabinets has always had maple veneers and a UV cured finish. It's what I used to build this miner saw station, this drill charging station, this drill press cart, not to mention all the cabinets I've made for my home. But these days, this is $105 per sheet, and I need 10 sheets to build all these boxes. Ouch. In the big box store, they don't offer much relief. They will sell me C-grade stuff with no UV coating and charge me $90 for the privilege. Yeah. That's not a thing that's happening. So instead, I decided to ask someone smarter than me. One of my go-to spots in Nashville for plywood is called, are you ready for it? Nashville Plywood. I called them up and told them what I was doing and asked for a less expensive alternative to what I've been using. And not only did they have a quick answer, but they actually blew me away with the solution they offered. Vietnamese birch plywood. It's high ply, has beautiful birch veneers that are very similar in color to the maple that I've been using. And the best part of all, $52 per sheet for the unfinished, and if I wanted the bougie UV coating that I'm used to, that would be a whopping $7 more.
Shut up and take my money!
So after I did my happy dance, I quickly collected myself and said, yes please, I'll take 10. And that's the story of how I made one phone call and saved myself $460 right out of the gate on this project. Like I said in the intro, goal number one is to save as much money on this project as possible while still building cabinets that I'm proud to look at every day. But I also want to make them simple and approachable to someone who's never made cabinets before. And to me, that means two things. Make the construction as simple as possible and use the fewest number of tools to do it while maintaining actual woodworking credibility. Look, I know it's hard to hear, but you cannot make quality cabinets with nothing more than your granddad's old handsaw and a box of rusty screws in a baby food jar you found in the basement, and I'll never try to shovel that kind of BS down your throat on this channel. What I can do is challenge myself to trim things down to the tools that I feel like get the job done well without being hackish or crude, and that starts right now. I purposely designed this project to be made entirely with sheet goods. That means no hardwoods, no planer, no joiner. You don't even need a sander. But in my opinion, the number one tool you should use to process sheet goods is a track saw. I've stated I don't know how many times on this channel that if I had it to do all over again, I would have bought a track saw way earlier than I did. The combination of really good dust collection, a riving knife to prevent binding just like a table saw has, and the ability to make perfectly straight, splinter-free cuts makes this tool an absolute joy to use and a game changer for cutting any kind of sheet good. There are, of course, cheaper alternatives to the green German track saw that shall not be named on YouTube. Most any of them at any price point can cut 3/4 inch plywood with no problem, and you still get the good dust collection and crisp, clean, perfectly straight cuts that are way harder to get with a circular saw. If you are willing to sacrifice good dust collection and splinter-free cuts to save money, I respect that, and I've already thought of you too. I made a video on how to cut perfectly straight lines with a circular saw using a simple to make jig. A track saw, it ain't. It's a shadow of a real track saw's capabilities, but I don't want that to be a barrier to making a project like this work for you. I'll add links below the video if you want to check out how to build that jig, and as an alternative, a cheaper track saw that's more than capable of cutting plywood and way more enjoyable than using a circular saw. So my typical workflow when making cabinets is to break plywood sheets down into manageable chunks like this, but then take them over to my cabinet saw to cut my parts to final dimensions. I don't know why, but this process has always just felt more comfortable to me, and besides that, I use the table saw to add dados or rabbets for joinery, so I'm already going there anyways. But I designed all the dados and rabbets out of this project, and in the process removed my rationalization, my crutch, my excuse to rely on my table saw. Instead, I decided to challenge myself and see if I could cut out all these cabinet parts with nothing but my track saw and some much appreciated accessories. Cutting a straight line is an easy thing. Heck, track saws have that in spades, but cutting a straight line is only half the task. Cabinets are basically just boxes assembled out of different size rectangles, and of course to make a rectangle, your straight line has to be perfectly parallel to the previous straight line. And as it turns out, there's an accessory for the track saw made just for this task. This accessory is appropriately named the parallel guide system. Parallel guides are a game changer for making cabinets which require you to cut lots and lots of the exact same size panels. Think of them just like the rip fence on your table saw. Setting the stops on the guide is just like setting the distance of the fence to your blade. Set the stop one time and make the same size cuts over and over quickly and accurately. No marking, no measuring, no hoping your track saw doesn't move on you by a hair. My favorite parallel guides are these blue ones from TSO. They're easy to put on and take off. They just drop in and lock into place. The positioning stops are designed to be easy to read and micro adjust. And even if you don't own the track saw made by the German F word, these guides work with all these other rails right out of the box. If this all looks overwhelming and you've never tackled a large project cutting up so many sheets before, here's a tip. This is how I keep myself from cutting the wrong part from the wrong sheet. I use labels. Not cryptic, nothing complicated. This is sheet number 9, and I made 3 large cuts. And each cut contains 2 finished parts. Now all my pieces are cataloged, and I just grab the sheet that corresponds to the parts I want to cut next. Besides the need to be parallel, the other thing cabinets like to be is square. Luckily, I have 2 ways to do this. The first way is to use one of these. This is a guide rail square, and it's the very first product from TSO that I bought 11 years ago when I bought my first track saw that I told you I should have bought years earlier. It also attaches easily to your track and gives you the ability to make perfectly square cuts. But I have another way to accomplish square cuts. It's not portable like a track square, but it is, well, awesome. This MFT workstation is the newest addition to my workshop, and it's now the way that I like to make all my perfectly square crosscuts. This uses a fence instead of a track square, but the concept is exactly the same. And this is especially useful for cutting things like smaller parts to final dimensions that are more tedious and time-consuming to do with just a track and a square. And MFT workbenches come in all different sizes. I even made a video a while back where I created one that's portable and made out of a little over 1 sheet of plywood. But even with all these accessories helping me make these cuts, there was one thing that I didn't have a good solution for, and that's an efficient way of cutting really thin parts, like small drawer fronts and stretchers. What I really need is some kind of stop system on the waist side of the cut, and to solve this problem, I turned to my Bamboo Lab H2D printer. I was able to find this adjustable stop that printed really quickly, and the really cool part is it could be combined with my Bow Products expanding bench dogs to give me the solution I was looking for. Now, instead of measuring out every single cut by hand, I could just feed my work continuously into the stop the same way you would do at a miter saw, and this made cutting all these small parts way faster. And to be sure, there are so many solutions out there on the market that I could have just bought that would do the exact same thing, but instead of buying one of those and waiting days to have it delivered, I love that my H2D allows me to problem solve on the fly, materialize a solution basically out of thin air, and get right back to work. Love them or hate them, everyone seems to have an opinion about pocket holes, just like they do with fancy green track saws. But the truth is, there's a time and place for everything, including pocket holes. And in my opinion, that time and place is building lots of cabinets. Pocket hole joinery is fast, strong, and cheap, which makes it one of the most accessible forms of joinery for anyone just starting out. But it's also something you'll carry through 12 years of woodworking like I have. Some people will say pocket holes are ugly. But that's just a dead giveaway that you're talking to someone who's never actually used them. They just read some anonymous post on the internet and made up their mind long before they ever tried them, because if you use them correctly, you're never going to see one in your finished cabinets, anywhere. There are lots of tools that I bought when I was first starting woodworking that I don't use anymore. I either found something better, faster, with more features, or I discovered the tool I was using was terrible and there was a much better way to do the same task. But a pocket hole jig has always been used in my shop, from the beginning, even now that I own every conceivable way to make joinery. And if you're curious just how many pocket holes go into 14 feet of upper and lower cabinets, I added them up, but I wouldn't be a good YouTuber if I just gave the answer away now. So when you're ready, write down your guess and I'll reveal the final tally later, at the least appropriate time I can find. One thing I wanted to include in this build were some tall floor-to-ceiling cabinets, the kind that can be used to hang your apron or just fill with shelves to store tools that don't have a good home. But assembling cabinets with 8-foot-long side panels can be a challenge at best. I like that there are companies out there who think of little ways to help me keep my nice-looking plywood from falling off my bench and onto the concrete floor, and all the more so if the solution is cheap. Rockler makes these little right-angle clips that hold your panels upright while your hands are freed up to grab a clamp and start assembling. This also makes it so I only really need one clamp to assemble this entire cabinet. One trick to using pocket holes is to have a clamp handy, and sometimes a mallet's nice too to nudge your part perfectly into place and then clamp the heck out of that joint, because pocket screws like to shift a bit if your joint isn't held tightly in place. To give this tall cabinet some added rigidity, I did add a divider, but I couldn't really reach inside the cabinet while it was on my table. Standing it upright was a better solution, and it let me get my clamps on it so that I could drive home the screws without it moving around on me. Okay, someone check me on this, because assembling a whole bank of cabinets should be a boring and repetitive process. And boring and repetitive is normally something I have a strong negative reaction to. But for cabinets, it's somehow different. I put my earbuds in, grab my driver and a clamp, and I settle into some kind of zone. I don't know if this taps into that same part of my brain that made 10-year-old me or 40-year-old me want to put together a 2,000-piece Lego set brick by brick, but somehow it happens. I just roll from one joint to the next, and before I know it, I have a cabinet. You might also notice something strange as I assembled these base cabinets. There's no solid top or bottom, and there's no back panel. Just two solid side panels with a bunch of 3-inch strips in between. This is another way I'm saving money on material costs. These cabinets are going to be sitting on top of a platform that creates the toe kick, so I don't really need a solid bottom panel. That's just redundant. And because these are going to be filled with drawers, there's really no need for a back panel that I'm never going to see. And since bottom and back panels typically sit inside dados, this helped me eliminate the need to create those joints. The upper cabinets are a little different in that, for obvious reasons, they do need a top and bottom panel, but again, I'm skipping out on putting in a back panel. Since these are shop cabinets, I'm totally fine seeing the white painted wall in the back when I open the door to grab something. And other than that, the assembly goes exactly the same with pocket screws all around. There is one other detail in these upper cabinets, and that's the need for shelf pin holes. I'm using one of those cheap jigs from Craig. Now, one thing about using this kind of jig with a drill bit is they don't leave the cleanest holes. I mean, maybe it's just me and I'm doing it wrong, or the drill bit's too worn out. Either way, it's fine for shop cabinets, and honestly, I can't remember the last time I opened a cabinet and did a double take when I saw the quality of the shelf pin holes. And besides, this jig makes the process super fast, and each hole is perfectly spaced on both sides, so your shelf sits level all around. Now, a shelf that wasn't perfectly level, that's something I'd notice. And that's pretty much it for the upper cabinets. Well, other than I have to do this 3 more times. Okay, now I've got to make drawers. Lots of drawers. 18 in fact, and 2 trays for good measure. These drawers are nothing special. I'm building them the same way I always do, with 5/8-inch plywood and 4 pocket screws. Well, I'm building them almost the same way. As I was assembling these, I began to miss that handy little corner clip that I used to build the tall cabinets. The problem is they only make them for 3/4-inch and 1/2-inch plywood, and this is 5/8. Luckily though, someone already ran into this issue and posted their solution on MakerWorld. I quickly downloaded this version of the corner jig made for 5/8-inch plywood, sent it to my H2D, and in what seemed like no time at all, I had 4 of these new corner jigs that fit my parts perfectly. These make things so much more fast and efficient when you're not trying to juggle drawer sides and keep them all from falling over while you try to clamp them together. And when you're building 18 of anything, efficiency does matter. And if $3 worth of filament buys me time back to do other tasks, I'll take it. So normally I would cut a groove in the bottom of all my parts, and those grooves would come together to form a place to slide the drawer bottom into. Pretty nifty trick, except that I usually cut those grooves on my table saw, and if you remember, I took the table saw out of play for this project. So instead, I'm going to fix the drawer bottoms in place with screws. First though, I need to do something to prevent a really big problem from happening. If you're new to this woodworking thing, here's a pro tip. Anytime you want to screw into the edge of a piece of plywood, drill a pilot hole first. Trust me here, one of the worst surprises in woodworking is bebopping along without a care in the world, driving your screws, and then this happens. The plywood splits and the joint's ruined. Okay, I'm being a bit dramatic here. This certainly doesn't rise to the level of using your saw to part ways with your fingers, but it is just as preventable. Actually, there's a tool that makes this super easy to prevent. It's a weird looking little thing called a countersink. With one smooth action, you can drill your pilot hole and countersink it so that the head of the screw sits below the surface of the wood. You can adjust the depth of the countersink, replace the cutter and the bit when they get worn out, and it won't mar your work because the stop collar sits on a bearing and stops moving when it touches the surface. Little actions saved always add up to big chunks of time later, which is super helpful when you have, 14 feet of cabinets to build. So before I install all these cabinets, I need to figure out the toe kicks. Since this cabinet layout has 3 24-inch cabinets in a row, then a break, and then another 3 24-inch cabinets, it makes a lot of sense to do 2 separate platforms that I can pre-level and then install all my cabinets on top. The platforms that I made for this project are made out of the same birch plywood that I built my cabinet boxes from, and you might think, well, why would you use UV-coated plywood for this? Isn't that a waste? Well, yeah, it is, and also it isn't. No, you absolutely don't need UV-coated plywood for this, but I would have ended up needing to buy an extra 2 sheets of some other type of ply to build these platforms when I had plenty of material left over from making the cabinet boxes, so I just incorporated these parts into my overall sheet good layout. Sometimes the economics of the situation cause us to do things that on the surface look like a waste, but are actually the most cost-effective option. Now comes the part of the project I was dreading the most. I don't have a helper here in the shop, so I need to install 10 cabinets to this wall and do it all by myself. Let me preface this by saying I have no idea if this is best practice, but then again, most cabinet installs are done with a crew of people, not just one man in his shop. I'm using composite shims to level these bases. I didn't want to use wooden shims since this could pick up moisture from the concrete and degrade the wood over time. Also, I'm not fastening these platforms to the wall. The plan will be to install the cabinets on top, anchor those to the wall, and then screw the cabinets down into the platform so the platform can't move or shift over time because they're basically going to become part of the cabinets. I'll start over here and install one of the tall cabinets first. This will be my reference point for the whole rest of the install, so I need to make sure that I get this cabinet perfectly level and plumb. The level part is already taken care of because I pre-leveled the base, but these 8-foot tall cabinets can get out of square pretty easily, so I'm constantly checking for plumb after every screw that I drive into the wall. Next, I'm going to add 2 base cabinets beside it, and there's a reason that I'm doing this now, which you're going to see in a minute. These cabinets get anchored to the studs after I shim any gaps due to the wavy wall, fasten them to the platform, and fasten them to one another through the sides. I added a design element to this project where the tall cabinets are actually deeper than the base cabinets, and I need to pay attention to make sure that that reveal remains consistent from top to bottom. Otherwise, it won't look right and kind of ruin the effect. Once I get the second base cabinet in, this platform is complete, and now I want to shift my focus to the uppers, but those present certain challenges. Problem number 1 is the upper cabinets need to be perfectly aligned at the top with the tall cabinets, which means at some point I'm going to need to get up on a ladder to make sure that I'm in position, and the cabinets need to be somehow up there on the wall first. Which brings me to problem number 2. I remember that I'm doing this all by myself. No help in sight. So I started stacking things on top of the base cabinets. Boxes, lumber, just whatever works to create a little platform that I can set my cabinet on. And then when I get it kind of close to the correct height, I use shims and slowly tap those in until it looks right. Now I can get up there on that ladder and check to see if I'm flush, make any final adjustments, and then anchor the first cabinet to the wall. And it was easy to repeat that same process with the second cabinet, but now I've run out of base cabinets to stack on. Or have I? That's more like it. While I'm installing these other uppers, here's another tip. Use clamps to make sure that the front edge of the cabinets are perfectly flush with one another, and as you work your way down, use shims in the back to get it perfect before you lock everything down with screws or screw the cabinets together. That way everything lines up perfect in the front. I guess it wasn't too bad getting 4 cabinets up without help. Okay, next I need to pull off one final trick, and it requires me to do the same process that I started this install with, but in reverse. I'm going to use the side of the upper cabinet to position this one and the base perfectly in place. Then I'm going to shim this side of the base until the tops are flush. Now I can go to the other side and shim that up until the platform is level. Anchor that tall cabinet to the wall and to the upper cabinet, and add my final 2 base cabinets. Well, I don't know if that's the right way to install cabinets, but it certainly is a way to install them, and I'm pretty happy with the results. Never lose sight of the whole project because there's always new ways to spend more money. So just as I was patting myself on the back for saving a boatload of money on plywood, my cabinet project sucker punched me. Hard. When did side mount slides get so freaking expensive? $22 for the basic model? And I need 20 pairs. There has to be a better way. I've seen the videos where you skip the slides altogether and just use plywood runners, and for sure that's a huge savings, but that's a hard pass for me. Because of what I'm going to be storing, I need full access to the drawers, and that means I need full extension slides. So instead, I went to my favorite spot on the web to get cabinet parts. By the way, if you thought Nashville Plywood Company was a little too on the nose, this website is called cabinetparts.com. I mean, come on. Anyway, I typically use them to buy all my door hinges and undermount slides because of their cheap prices, but I've never tried to buy side mount slides. And what I found there was finally acceptable. That's an appropriate price for shop cabinets. I'm not familiar with this brand of slides, but they do have the same load rating as the Home Depot slides, 100 pounds, and they seem to have good customer rating. I have this admittedly crazy theory that all side mount slides in the whole world come out of the same factory in China because every single set of slides I've ever bought look identical. I mean, the same hole patterns, the same dimensions, everything. Yeah, like most crazy theories, it's probably wrong. Anyways, after shipping and taxes, I saved myself almost $200. Already, I feel like I've so thoroughly beaten the big orange board, but I'm not done yet. 5 years ago, when I built my miter saw station, I did two things that you don't normally see in shop cabinets. I made shaker-style frame and panel doors, and I added face frames. But to keep things simple and approachable, I'm making these new shop cabinets frameless. In fact, I'm not even applying edge banding, and I'm swapping out the shaker-style doors for solid MDF panels. After doing some quick calculations on the number of board feet of lumber needed, the current price of hard maple, and subtracting out the cost of MDF, I figured this design choice is going to save me another $262 and also a bunch of time not making frame and panel doors. And this is where I decided to stick it to the man one more time. Do you know what's even more obscenely overpriced than drawer slides? Drawer pulls. I have a confession to make. I kind of have a thing for these stainless bar pulls. I love them. I have them all over my shop. Practically every door and drawer has one on them. But at $8 a piece, I can save another $224 by figuring out another way. For the upper doors, I went with a super simple solution. I used a chamfer bit in my palm router to remove material from the bottom edge of the door, just enough to give my fingers a place to pull the door open. It's also going to help me preserve the look of a solid, uninterrupted bank of cabinets. But for the drawers, I had to go in a different direction. I want to make cutouts in the top for my fingers. And to do this, I designed this router template, which I then printed out on my H2D. I was concerned that most of the other router templates that I found online weren't too big of a recess and the cabinet boxes were going to end up showing through the back. So I made this one, which removes just 3/4 of an inch of material, which is enough for me to get my fingers in there without risking exposing the drawer box on the other side. I even marked the jig using a different color filament, which is really easy to do with the H2D's dual print nozzles, and now I'll always know which size cutout this template makes. The doors are all going to be hung using hidden door hinges, and these are really easy to install using this door hinge jig from Craig. This one jig lets you cut the perfect size pocket for the door hinge to sit inside, and you can use the same jig to drill the pilot holes for the screws that hold the hinge in place. Now, attaching the other side of the hinge to the cabinet, that's a little more tricky, but I have a process that I like, and it looks like this. By the way, it's 564, the number of pocket screws in these cabinets. And you might ask yourself, why MDF? Why not just use more of that cheap plywood I found? And that's a great question. One that I found myself asking when I was halfway through priming and painting these fronts in my garage in January. Between the cost of the primer and the paint, I would have saved money and time just using the plywood. But then again, my cabinet fronts wouldn't be black, and I really want my cabinet fronts to be black. So this time, design is going to trump cost, and I'm fine with that. This little jig I just printed out on the H2D, and it's one of the most handy jigs because it lets you precisely lay out where the door hinges need to be located. I found this jig on MakerWorld for free. Cost me about 5 cents in filament to print out, and I'm good to go. And for sure, there are loads of little jigs like this that I could go buy all over the internet, probably also made of plastic. But here's the thing, if I lose my jig or somehow break it, I can just print out a new one in like 30 minutes. Let's see Amazon Prime beat that. And once I mark my layout lines, I attach this little jig to the bottom of my cabinet. And this little shelf, it's adjustable based on the overhang that you want your door to have. And once I have it locked down, I can set my door on that little ledge, and by having my hinge plate already attached to the hinge on the door side, I can place the screw holes right over my layout lines, and the hinge is perfectly set in place. And this is the easiest method I found so far to install Euro-style hidden hinges. Well, here's what I know. This is freaking awesome. Starting to see this come together with the clean black fronts, no hardware, and that natural birch ply looks so good. And for the drawer fronts, I relied on my H2D again, and I actually designed my own system for installing fronts perfectly. Just attach this little spacer plate to the bottom of the cabinet, and this is going to create the reveal, and it's also going to give you a ledge that you can set your drawer front on. Now just line up your drawer front from side to side where you want it to be, clamp it down, and screw it to the drawer box from the inside. Next, I can use these little H brackets to slide over the edge of the installed drawer front. These little brackets ensure that you get the perfect spacing between drawers, as well as perfect alignment side to side. And the cool part is they act like a third hand holding the next drawer front in place while you clamp it down and drive in the screws. Just rinse and repeat that process with the H brackets until you reach the top. If you want a set of these drawer front brackets, I actually sell them now in my shop, which I'll link to down in the description. The H2D is also a big help in getting this new space organized. I found this super simple design for spray can storage. This thing is compact, easy to assemble, but totally scalable both up and sideways to fit the number of spray cans that you need to store. I've also done projects before where I created drawer dividers out of wood, but I find all these dividers to be too chunky and take up too much valuable room, and they aren't movable. In my new cabinets, I created a set of modular bins in different sizes and custom made to fit my specific drawer dimensions. The large 350 by 320 millimeter print bed of the H2D makes it possible to create bins large enough to fit tools, not just office supplies. And I can change the configuration of the bins a number of ways, which I couldn't do with my old system. Well, all I have to do now is install my countertop, and for this, I went in a completely different direction. Last year when I built my MFT workstation, the folks at Formica sent me a sheet of matte black laminate to cover the top with. That project turned out amazing, and this time around they sent me a different product. This is Formica Compact. It's about 3/4 of an inch thick, and this one piece weighs about as much as I do. In fact, I had to cut the full sheet in half with my track saw just to get it out of the back of the truck. This is a fully phenolic panel throughout, and it should make a great countertop for these cabinets. But I do need to stick this between my two tall cabinets and against this wavy wall. So to start the install, I made a template out of some chipboard that I got at the craft store. The two ends of the template match the sides of the tall cabinet, so if there's any deviation at all off of square, I'll capture that when I cut it. And to get the back along the wall, I'm using a scribing method to transfer the shape of the wall to the template. Now I can just lay my template on top of the material, tape it in place, and cut to my lines. This stuff cuts with a track saw, which is awesome. You do have to go a little bit slower though, but the cut is super clean. This compact is a huge upgrade over plywood counters, and it comes in a ton of different colors, wood grains, and stone textures. It also cuts really nice with a router. I chamfered all the edges as well as cut a power cord access hole in the top so that I can charge my laptop. I did need to go find a helper to help me get this thing onto the cabinets. It's just so heavy and awkward. This is the one part of the project I just couldn't do alone. And the cool part is you can just drill pilot holes right into this stuff and screw it down just like you would plywood or MDF countertops. Now that looks amazing. All right, so what is the final tally on the savings building these cabinets this way versus the way that I made my miter saw station with the new cheaper plywood, no back and bottom panels, cheaper drawer slides, no pulls, and frameless MDF fronts? The total cost savings comes to $1,368. And the countertop is the only part of this project I didn't actually pay for, so I'm not including that in my savings for obvious reasons. Well, I hope this video gave you some good ideas on how to save money for storage in your shop. See you next time.